Hey everyone. In this video and the ones that follow, I would like to share some insights about a to me, very interesting Zen phrase or Zen words that can help us to really deepen our meditation practice, whether we're sitting on a cushion or driving in a car or walking in the neighborhood or what have you. And the phrase in Japanese is fumetsu. I want to give you an image of what this looks like in the Japanese because it's just so, to me, it's so beautiful. This is a image by the former abbot of Eiheiji in Japan. And the Chinese character on the right is fu. In Roman transliteration, it would be spelled fu, and it means not or nothing or the opposite of. And metsu, the second character there on the left side, is metsu, or in Roman transliteration would be metsu. So together it's fu metsu. Metsu meaning destruction or death. And one possible translation of this, putting these two Chinese characters together, is no death. Other translations might include immortality or indestructibility. The phrase fumetsu comes from the Heart Sutra, a sutra that is chanted daily in many Zen temples. And oftentimes in the English translation of the Heart Sutra, it's referred to as no death. So this is fumetsu, no death. So what does it mean to say no death? Or what does it mean to say that there is no death from a Zen perspective? Right? From a Zen perspective of things, what does no death mean? Oftentimes, in a Western context, we think of immortality as something that belongs to a soul that's separated from the body. We might think of immortality in that way, like my body dies, but my soul will live on forever for an immortal length of time and a non-ending length of time. This is not the meaning, though, of fumetsu from a Zen context, from a Zen perspective. Fumetsu, no death, is referring to something else. And if we really practice, if we really study this fumetsu, it can lead to a deep insight into our own nature, the nature of our own body and mind. If we look at fumetsu a little closer and include with it the phrases in the Heart Sutra that precede it, we might get maybe a little bit more or deeper understanding. The phrase that precedes it is fu shou. So it's the same fu as you see on the right side there, which means no or not. And then the other character is shou, which means birth. So no birth. Fu shou, fu metsu. Right? No birth, no death. Even in Buddhism, we talk about impermanence, that everything is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing. So what does it mean to say that there is no birth and that there is no death? Right? So both of those two together, those are a pair. There's no birth and there's no death. In the following videos, I'll give you a perspective that might help us to understand this philosophical concept in Zen. The first one will be about how science can help us to understand no birth, no death. The second one will be how Hinduism, particularly in the Bhagavad Gita, how Hinduism understands no birth, no death. And the third one will be from the perspective within the Gospels, within Christianity, on an understanding of no birth and no death. So I want to invite you to maybe consider for you right now, before we get into those perspectives, what no death or indestructibility might mean when it comes to a Zen context, and from a sitting practice, right? From meditating, focusing your mind on one object, right? Maybe starting with your breathing, just focusing, and anytime the mind wanders, you come back to your breathing. This helps to focus our mind, but we can also focus on a story, like in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Gospel, and we can also focus on a further philosophical elaboration. So, from a Zen perspective, I want to offer you a way to think about this that my teacher shared or offered me. And this requires us to be settled, to be sitting, right? To be sitting in shikantaza with our backs upright, our eyes with a soft focus, our hands in the cosmic mudra, eyes lowered with a soft focus, the body relaxed. Breathing, we just allow the breathing to do the breathing. A question that you could focus on, if you want to understand fumetsu, fusho, fumetsu, no birth, no death, is the following. What is your face before your parents were born? What is your face before your parents were born? We tend to think of ourselves as living in this period between our birth and our death. It's almost as if we start as a blank slate from birth, and then our life ends at death. But from a Buddhist perspective, we don't begin at birth. We don't begin even at conception. Who were we before our parents were born? This is an invitation for us to see that we've been around for a much longer time than we give ourselves credit for. Perhaps not in this particular body, in this particular form, but all of our actions are the result. This body is the result of all of our previous actions. This body and mind is the result of all of our previous actions of body, speech, and mind. And this doesn't have a sharp beginning with birth, nor does it have a sharp ending with death. Death is not final. And yet there's not this concern for an afterlife in Zen like you might find in other religions. There's not a concern. It's not like this. There's not this idea that persists within Zen that there's this soul that's going to enter heaven. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I don't know whether there's a heaven or a hell to go to after we die. Isn't a question that I'm really concerned about, and I don't know the answer to that question. what Husho Fumetsu is trying to get us to think about is not something that happens in the future, nor about something that happened in the past, but to see, to recognize, what is our true face before our parents were born? What is our true face before our parents were born? This will help us to connect more deeply with this phrase from the Heart Sutra, Fumetsu, no death. We can even use it to think about when we have a death in our family, right? Maybe it's not even pertaining to our death, but the death of a loved one. Fumetsu. What does that mean? No death. And this does not substitute for grief. To understand this philosophically is not a substitution for grief that we might be experiencing as a result of the death of a loved one. So I want to make that really clear. But what might no death mean when it comes to the death of a loved one? And in Buddhism, there is what we call the two truths. There's two realities that we exist in simultaneously. One is the conventional truth. This is the world where there is birth, there is death. It's the world that we generally live in. But when we practice meditation and when we study the Dharma, we begin to understand that there's another world that exists simultaneously in this conventional world. And that's the world of the absolute dimension or the ultimate dimension. And in this world, there is no birth and there is no death. We can take a look at it from the other end too. We tend to think of our children as new, young, maybe younger than us, depending on how young your children are. But I was watching a video the other day with my 6-year-old son, and it was showing us how the beginnings of the solar system. It was showing us an image of the beginnings of the solar system, which is interesting because we don't know what it actually looked like, but it's helpful to have an image of these things. And we were watching this, and I told my son, all of us were there at that beginning point in the solar system, where before there was even a sun, there was a cloud of dust. We were in that cloud of dust. Me, him, we were both in that cloud of dust. All of us that are alive. If you're watching this now, you were in that cloud of dust, right? Of course, this happened billions of years ago. The creation of our solar system happened some 4.5 billion years ago. But the molecules that make up our body were certainly in that place. And I think this can help to key us in, to clue us in to what no birth, no death means, and to connect it with our children as well. They're not new. If we can learn to see our children as having been here well before their birth, they're as old as we are. And I don't mean that conventionally, I mean that from an absolute dimension. There's total equality when it comes to no birth. So I want to invite you to maybe think less about this concept, no death, no birth, and to consider sitting with it, chewing on it. What is your face before your parents were born?